Blaine from Brazos River Charter School with This Week in History, specifically the week of April the 26th through May 2nd. So let's see the big events today. This is Horseshoe Falls. That's on the Canadian side. Niagara Falls, a beautiful spot in the world that I've never had the opportunity to go to, but one of these days I hope to. On April the 29th of 1921, a lady by the name of Miss Annie Edison Taylor died. However, 20 years earlier, in 1901, she became the first person ever, actually, to survive going over Niagara Falls in a barrel. So let's see. This is Miss Taylor. She was a widowed school teacher who was living on the very edges of poverty. Remember, this is a long time before there were any sort of retirement plans or pension plans or anything like that if you were in the education business. And after reading about a number of people that were called stunters at the time, she decided to try this to secure her financial future. So she chose an unused pickle barrel, about 5 feet tall, about 3 feet around, and then she heavily modified it. She came up with, she lined the inside of it with cushions, first of all. She came up with an ingenious leather strap to hold herself in, and in the bottom of the barrel, she put a 200-pound anvil to keep the barrel as well as her feet pointed the right direction. Now, she tested it first on her cat. The cat did come out unscathed, although I would imagine not terribly happy. And then she decided to hire herself a manager and a rowboat. Manager towed the barrel out into the middle of the river and let it go. And 20 minutes later, it was all over. Rowboat down below got her when she washed up on the Canadian side of the shore. She emerged dazed, but unhurt, largely, a little bruised. But her manager, first of all, her manager, who could have been arrested for manslaughter had she not survived, actually stole the barrel. So she hired private detectives to try and find it. The original barrel was never found anywhere. She produced a replica of it, and she would charge folks to have their picture taken with her. She went on a speaking tour. She made a little bit of money, but it fizzled out pretty fast, honestly. So she died destitute in the end. It's really kind of sad. By the way, today there are very hefty fines for someone who tries to do what Miss Taylor did. And since she became the first woman to do it, out of a grand total of 15 who have attempted, 5 have died. And for the record, she was 63 years old when she became the first person ever to survive going over Niagara Falls in a barrel. So, kind of an impressive lady. A little crazy, but an impressive lady nonetheless. Well, last week, if you remember right, I told you about a man who was very, very insane, I think. Well, it wasn't this fellow, but we'll get to him in just a moment. Although maybe he was too. This is John Wilkes Booth. On April the 26th of 1865, John Wilkes Booth was killed. He was, of course, the infamous murderer of President Lincoln. One of the eeriest photographs I've ever come across is this one. This is from Lincoln's second inaugural address. So this would have been in March of 1865, March the 4th, I believe. Here's Lincoln. This is on the Capitol building. And up on the portico, that is John Wilkes Booth. About 6 weeks later, President Lincoln would be dead at that man's hand. What is lesser known, though, is the man who killed Booth. This is the fellow I mentioned last week. Sergeant Boston Corbett is his name. By 1865, Boston Corbett was a hardened battle veteran of the Civil War who had re-enlisted 3 times. He had risen from the rank of private to sergeant. He also served time in Andersonville Prison. If you know anything about Andersonville Prison in Georgia, about 1/3 of the men who ever went into Andersonville never got out of Andersonville. It was a hellhole, to say the least. He was undoubtedly a very brave, very tough man. He was also entirely mentally unhinged as well. Mr. Corbett while walking around Boston, that actually was his hometown, Boston, Corbett's hometown was Boston, found himself confronted by a couple of prostitutes, and he felt himself tempted. He came to believe that women were the source of all evil in the world, and I'm not going to make the joke. I'm afraid, no, you're going to have to do that yourself. That all women were that's not true, by the way, that women were the source of all evil in the world, and so he decided to protect himself from temptation. So he went home, got a pair of scissors, made a small incision in his scrotum, and removed both of his testicles. He then headed to a prayer meeting, went to have a dinner, and took a stroll around Boston Commons that evening before going home. Well, Mr. Corbett. Mr. Corbett actually, when Booth was found, Booth was in a tobacco drying barn. Booth refused to come out. Corbett was among the men that were there. They set the place on fire to try and force him out. Booth still wasn't coming. Corbett saw him through a crack in the wood, and he fired his pistol, ended up shooting him through the neck and jaw. Now, Corbett was spared a court-martial because the instructions were they really wanted Booth alive. You know, give him a fair trial and then hang him. But Corbett was spared a court-martial. He got his share of the reward money, too, about $1,600, which would be somewhere in the ballpark of about $50,000 today. He was discharged from the Army, and then he went back to his profession, which was that of a hat maker. Now, got a little ahead of myself earlier, but of course, Alice in Wonderland had its Mad Hatter, and I'm sure you may have heard the term from somebody to be mad as a hatter. Well, there's a reason for that. This may explain Corbett's mental issues. You see, Corbett's profession was a hatter. He made men's silk hats. And in the 19th century, part of the process of making men's silk hats involved mercury. There was no way to avoid getting mercury on your hands and thus absorbed into your skin, as well as inhaling some of the fumes as well. So, although Corbett's war record suggests he was a very brave man, he was also pretty much mad as a hatter. Well, that's it for this week in history, but just to let you know what's coming up, next week, we will meet Miss Unsinkable. You think you've had some bad luck in your life. You ain't heard nothing yet. Thank you for the time. I'm Carl Lanning. This is Brazos River Charter School, and we look forward to seeing you right here next week.